Obscure NBA rules you haven't heard. In the NBA, there are obviously rules that are put into place to make sure the games run smoothly. Whether this be a time restriction on how long a player can stand in the paint, or how many fouls a player can commit before fouling out, the rules are what shape the game. And if you want to learn about some of the craziest and obscure NBA rules of all time, then you've come to the right place. These are some of the most unknown rules in NBA history. So make sure you stick around until the end to find out what could happen when a disaster strikes a team. Also, be sure to leave a like and hit the subscribe button if you enjoy NBA content like this. The no shatter rule. Sometimes in the NBA, there are players that are so strong they can shatter the backboard with a dunk. While this might be exciting for the fans, it's actually pretty dangerous, so the league has a rule against it. If a player dunks the ball so hard that it breaks the backboard, the points are not counted and the player receives a technical foul. The player that comes to mind when thinking about this rule is definitely Shaq, who broke his fair share of backboards in his career. If you want to learn more about times that NBA players broke the rim, be sure to check out the video on our channel. Must-use timeouts. In every NBA game played, each team has 6 total timeouts they can use at any point in the game. These are important because they can be used to break the other team's momentum, sub in key players, or even to advance the ball. However, what would happen if a team just decided to never use their timeouts? Apparently, that would be against the rules because each team is required to use at least 4 of their 6 total timeouts. On top of that, it's also necessary that a team keeps at least 1 timeout to use in the 4th quarter. The reason for these rules is so that the television networks have enough time to roll out their commercials. It definitely makes sense for teams to use their timeouts in strategic ways, but I guess you don't always take into account that the NBA is a form of entertainment and must be presented in a certain way. Jump ball rule. Just like before every game starts, we have the tip-off at center court. The rule for a jump ball is that players must be facing the basket they are shooting in. This seems obvious, but the weird rule attached to this is that if the players do not line up correctly, the official has 24 seconds, or a full shot clock, to blow the whistle and call a foul. Then the game would restart with the players in the correct jump ball position. If the referee misses the call and 24 seconds passes, then the game just continues normally. I've been watching basketball for quite a while, and I can't think of a time when the game had to restart because the players weren't lined up correctly for tip-off. It seems like a useless rule, since these are professional basketball players that know how to line up for a jump ball. But like Kevin Garnett once said, anything is possible. 6th man rule. If you are the average basketball fan, I'm sure you know that games are played with 5 players from each team on the court. However, it seems that there is a rule in place that makes that number sort of flexible. If an NBA team fields 6 players on the court instead of the maximum of 5, the 6th player can continue to play unless he gets noticed by the officials. So basically, as long as the ref doesn't see the extra man on the court, it's allowed. This is definitely one of the weirdest rules because it almost seems unnecessary, but there's actually an example of this happening. It occurred in 2008 in a game between the Blazers and Celtics. It was the end of the first half, and the Blazers had possession. Odin saw his teammate wide open down low and passed him the ball. As he went up for the layup, the Celtics players on the court started realizing that there are 6 Blazers on the court. Garnett and other teammates were pleading to the ref to give them a tech or take the basket away. But because the official didn't notice until after, there was absolutely nothing he could do. More than 6 fouls? In the NBA, the limit on the amount of fouls a player can commit before having to sit out is 6. This is one more than NCAA basketball, but that makes sense considering the NBA game is a little longer. So usually, when a player commits his 6th foul, he is forced to sit on the bench for the remainder of the game. But there's actually a rule that goes around that. If a team does not have 5 able-bodied players that can play, due to injury or being thrown out of the game, then the player that fouled out can stay in the game. This reminds me of the Warriors' final game of the 2010 season. It was the game where they only had 6 healthy players on the roster, and by the end of the game, they were down to 5. One of the players eventually fouled out, which should have forced this rule to be put in place. But for some reason, the referee refused to let the fouled out player back into the game. Each injured player on the bench had to come into the game, commit a foul, and then ask to leave the game. Then the fouled out player was allowed to come back. It seems like even the officials had a hard time with this rule, probably because it's so uncommon. No Timberlands. After the famous Malice in the Palace incident, David Stern came up with the 2005 dress code reform, which was outrageously strict on what players could wear in a business environment. One of the most confusing bans from the commissioner was the rule that players could not wear Timberland-style boots while in the eyes of NBA fans. David explained this decision during a press conference regarding the new policies, saying, There are different uniforms for different occasions. There's a uniform you wear on the court, there's a uniform you wear when you're on business, there's a uniform you might wear on your casual downtime with your friends, and there's a uniform you might wear when you go back home. We're just changing the definition of the uniform that you wear when you're on NBA business. There are a lot of New Yorkers who would have a huge problem with this. In fact, one player heard we were doing this story and commented, "Hey yo, real talk, that no Tim's rule is mad whack. Where I come from, Tim's all the uniform for handling your business. The NBA's bugging if they think this beef is done. Yeah, B, we'll take it there, dead ass." End quote. No logos. The NBA has changed their stance on logos more recently, allowing advertisers to have logos on the jerseys of players. Players, on the other hand, cannot endorse a brand or logo on any part of their clothing, or in J.R. Smith's case, his leg. In 2018, Smith wrote, "So I was informed today that I would be fined every game if I don't cover up my Supreme tattoo on my legs during games. These people in the league office are something else," finishing the statement with the middle finger emoji, and saying he felt targeted by the league. "I swear I'm the only person they do shit like this to," he wrote. "Because it's me, it's a problem all of a sudden. Shit, whack." Just by reading all that, it sure feels like he really did not like the league asking him to cover his tattoo. The weirder part is that not all logos have to be removed. For example, the league has no problem with Kyrie Irving's Friends tattoo and Marcin Gortat's Jordan Jumpman logo tattoo. Gotta love a little arbitrary rule enforcement, right? No punching. Most basketball fans know that kicking the ball is against the rules, but apparently so is punching the ball. It's probably something that a lot of NBA fans have never thought of being a rule, because why would a player ever punch the ball? Oftentimes, defenders will stick their foot out to block a pass, and a kickball will be called. But I'm not sure there's a common time where an official would call a punch ball violation. I guess the most obvious would be trying to save the ball from going out of bounds. This rule is obviously in place to keep the game as safe as possible, because it wouldn't be ideal for players to be throwing punches randomly, especially when they are near the fans. No double zeros. The NBA usually isn't strict when it comes to a player's number. As long as another player on the team doesn't wear that number, and it isn't retired, you're usually good to go. But when it comes to the number 0, there are some issues. A player on the team is allowed to wear the number 0 or 00 as long as they are the only one on the team to do so. Meaning, if you are on the same team as Westbrook or Damian Lillard, who both wear the number 0, then you cannot wear 00. The reason behind this rule is that it might be difficult for a scoring official to differentiate between a 0 and a 00 in the middle of a game, especially in crucial moments. It would be a shame for a player to foul out at the end of a game when he didn't deserve the foul because of a simple number mix-up. Mandatory rest. I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, have heard of people complaining about load management, or in some cases, star players taking off certain games so that they can be ready to play harder in the playoffs. The NBA has certainly cracked down on this a little bit, giving out fines to teams that bench their healthy star players in games that draw in a lot of attention. But have you ever heard of a rule that forced teams to give their players rest? Neither did we, but it seems like a pretty standard rule to ensure athletes are giving their bodies ample time to heal. The rule is that NBA players must have 18 days of mandatory rest. This is also put in place so teams don't go crazy with too many practices during the regular season. While it does seem like an obvious rule, I think most people didn't know it existed because the load management issue has been such a factor over the past couple seasons. Disaster draft. This is definitely one of the craziest rules the NBA has ever created. If a team has a tragic disaster occur in which 5 or more players from the team were to die, then a disaster draft would be held. In this draft, each team is allowed to protect 5 players, and the team that faced the tragedy would pick from the pool of leftover NBA players. This style of draft is very similar to an expansion draft in which a new team is joining the NBA and gets to pick players from each team to add to the new one. This disaster draft rule has never been put into place, and let's hope that it never does. If you feel like we left any obscure rules off the list, be sure to comment them down below. As always, thank you for watching, and be sure to drop a like if you enjoyed. We post tons of quality videos about the NBA, so don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss out on exciting upcoming content.